In this video, we'll look at one of Marvel's goofiest video game releases, the Fantastic Four for PS1. For some background context as we begin, it was developed by Probe Entertainment and published by Acclaim, at a time when Acclaim was being heavily criticized for releasing low-effort cash-grab games. So this Fantastic Four title was amongst their new releases aimed at enhancing their reputation. We'll talk about how that went for them more towards the end of the video. But to start, the premise for the game doesn't sound too bad. It's a beat-em-up, side-scrolling adventure featuring the full Fantastic Four roster, plus a bonus member, She-Hulk. Together with up to 3 friends, assuming you bought the multi-controller adapter for the PS1, you could play together and fight villains from the comics. Another notable detail about this game is that it was also the Fantastic Four's first time all being playable together. They had a Quest Probe game prior to this, but it only featured the Thing and Human Torch as playable characters, so this PS1 game would have been a big deal for fans. Sadly, the execution is lacking. To begin, the first impressions you get from the game aren't great. Starting with the cover art, Giga Chad Mr. Fantastic definitely stands out from the pack and is absurdly over the top, like he was stung by bees and had no Benadryl around. In Probe and Acclaim's defense though, this is taken from an actual comic cover for Fantastic Four number 416, so at the very least, the cover suggests that the game will be based on the comics. However, it also tells you you're probably in for a goofy experience. That idea would be further reinforced once you check out the opening FMV cutscene for Mr. Fantastic, which plays when you boot up the game.
Mr. Fantastic!
That's totally old school porno music, right? And why is the cutscene so obscenely dark? It doesn't get much better from here as we look at the other members' intros.
Invisible Woman! The Thing! It's clobbering time! Human Torch! Flame on!
So not a great start, but continuing forward when you hit the main menu, you'll be greeted by a close-up image of the Thing, awkwardly staring at you as you decide where to head to next. I chose the settings, and there are a variety to look through. One of the first things you'll want to do is customize the difficulty. The game isn't exactly hard, but there aren't any saves, so you'll want to adjust some things to ensure you can reach the end. Outside of the normal difficulty toggle, you can also adjust how many lives you get, as well as the amount of continues you're given after losing those lives. Continues are essentially simulating you popping another quarter into the arcade machine after dying. Speaking of which, if you do die, there's a funny game over cutscene featuring Dr. Doom.
Game over!
One of the settings I appreciate is that you can toggle what the game calls drones, which are AI teammates that will fight alongside you if you don't have any friends to play with. I don't have friends, so this was really helpful and allowed me to play with a full Fantastic Four squad. As a side note, whether with drones or friends, if you actually decide to play this game, I recommend playing with a team regardless, since trying to play solo was miserable. Recovery animations are super slow, so it's easy to get continually stun-locked and knocked around, especially because you're the only target. So having multiple heroes spread things out more and was a lot more enjoyable. But anyway, once you've adjusted the game to your liking, you'll then pick amongst the 5 available characters to play as. Yes, even though this is the Fantastic Four, we have 5 playable characters with the inclusion of She-Hulk. Even though this may seem strange, she was a valid inclusion due to her time as an alternate member about a decade prior in the comics. It started in the Secret Wars event when the male members of the team were whisked away to Battleworld to fight amongst other superpowered characters. Outside of combat, Ben Grimm, aka the Thing, experienced strange changes to his physiology while there, namely the ability to change himself from Thing form to human form at will. This was a big deal for Ben because he doesn't have this luxury on Earth, and his physical appearance as the Thing causes him a lot of torment. He desperately wishes to look normal like the rest of his team, and we often see him in the comics struggling with this. Even though Reed has tried numerous times to create a cure for Ben's rocky appearance, the effects have always been temporary. So Battleworld presented a unique opportunity for Ben, and when the Secret Wars event ended, while everyone was getting ready to warp back home, Ben chose to stay in order to do some soul searching. Without asking the rest of the team, he even picked She-Hulk as his replacement since he wanted someone strong to fill the void. This was a surprise to the rest of the team, but they agreed to welcome She-Hulk as their 4th member. Ben eventually returned, so She-Hulk's time as a member was relatively short-lived, from issue 265 to about 300. But still, this is why she's often seen as Fantastic Four adjacent, and likely why she was added here. Going back to the game, once you've selected your team, you're ready to begin the story. So what's the story premise in this game? No, I'm legitimately asking because the game barely tells you anything about it. There aren't mission cutscenes or anything like that, the best you get is a sentence on a load screen at the top of a level. In the case of the first chapter, Attack of the Mole Men. Plucked from their headquarters by a mysterious beam, the Fantastic Four are plunged into a city filled with chaos. So in all fairness, that could set the stage for an interesting mystery, but it's not doing that. It's mostly just a hand-wavy premise to get us from location to location. In fact, level transitions are absolutely confusing at times. There were moments where I would be fighting through what I assumed was the midpoint of a level, such as the Squirrel homeworld in space, only to then see a title card for a new act taking place in Atlantis with no idea of how or why it happened. You kinda just walk into new chapters. The only real inkling of a coherent story we get is through a synopsis described in the game's manual. It reads, "The Dean of Destruction, Dr. Doom, has finally come up with the master scheme which will cap his crime career and give him the vast power he craves. As always, his evil ambitions are as cunning as they are deadly. This time, Dr. Doom plans to destroy his hated adversaries, the Fantastic Four, and at the same time, construct a time machine which will make him the master of all worlds, in any time or alternate universe. Can the Fantastic Four thwart him? It doesn't look good, because Dr. Doom has connived to enlist the Fantastic Four in his scheme. All of them are unwittingly helping him find the rare components which are scattered throughout history. They'll either perish in the attempt, or succeed, giving Dr. Doom the ultimate power to destroy them. Looks like Dr. Doom can't lose unless Reed Richards and the rest of the Fantastic crew can master this deadly puzzle and beat the Doctor at his own game." So based on that, Dr. Doom is transporting us where he wants so that we'll get him valuable components so that he can build a time machine to take over the world. Even though we never actually collect any components in the game. Honestly, I'm not even really sure. This story seems very thrown together and mostly serves as a means for us to bounce around some noteworthy comic locations. So let's at least take a look at them. When we start the game, we're teleported into New York City while it's being overrun by the minions of the villain Mole Man. Some of you may be asking, who the hell is Mole Man? Well, in the comics, he began as a normal man that was outcasted by the rest of society based on his looks. So one day, he decided to strike out alone and find somewhere to live in isolation. While exploring a cavern, he fell into a deep hole that left him underground with no escape. However, he rather liked the seclusion and adapted to the setting. Due to the pitch black environment, he lost most of his sight, but also developed a radar sense, allowing him to still fully read his surroundings. Here, he became the master of his subterranean environment, lording over the various creatures that reside within. However, he still holds a grudge and aims to get revenge on the surface dwellers. To do so, he often orders these smaller minions to do his bidding, and they're referred to as moloids. So I like that when we begin the mission, they're who we encounter first, and they act as a nice starter enemy to beat up on. One of the other things you'll first notice when you start this level is the soundtrack again, since the jazz saxophone makes its return.
Get ready! Flame on! It's clobbering time!
I have to admit though, the cheesiness of it is growing on me, and I should be fair, there are some later tracks that I do think fit their levels better, so I'll play those when we get there as well. But let's talk about the gameplay while we're here too. To start, it's pretty standard. You can do light and heavy basic attacks. You can also block, although it's strangely tied to your special meter, so you have to juggle it a bit. With the amount of damage coming at you, I wish blocking was a little more flexible. However, if you're getting crowded, blocking can actually be somewhat powerful since enemies will damage each other while trying to hit you. So my assumption is that the meter was meant to prevent you from just letting enemies defeat themselves while you shield the whole time. Each playable character is also equipped with 4 special abilities. 3 of them can be triggered at any time for free, while the 4th ability is their most powerful one, and it costs 50% of your special meter to perform, which is indicated by each character's green vertical bar at the corners of the screen. At first, I assumed that you'd need to juggle that meter for all of your abilities, but it only applies to your ultimate and blocking, so you can freely use your other abilities at will, in a manner of speaking at least. Performing those special attacks is very slow and clunky. You need to hold the right trigger and press the associated directional inputs to initiate it, and even though those inputs are short, you're stationary during this period of time, and the attack animations themselves have a bit of a wind up and wind down, so you're left quite vulnerable and easy to interrupt. It feels especially bad if the game doesn't register your input, so you're just left standing there looking like an idiot. Since you have to hold the right trigger to initiate it in the first place, and there are only 4 abilities per character, I'm not sure why it's not just a 2-button trigger, like R2 plus up or R2 plus down. That would save some time, reduce the chance of input error, and maybe make the inputs feel more responsive. It would also be a lot easier to remember too, since as it stands, inputs are different across characters, and the left and right inputs flip if you face the other way. So it's pretty easy to get things mixed up in the heat of battle, especially if you like to switch characters often. Speaking of which, that's actually a cool feature about this game. At will, you can pause and switch to any character that's not already in use. This helps add some variety if you've been playing one character for a while, or maybe you want to switch tactics, like picking a stronger hero or a faster hero depending on the situation. So I like that inclusion. While we're on the subject, let's talk about each hero's unique abilities. In general, I thought the abilities themselves were typically pretty cool, and I appreciate that they felt accurate to each character. For example, Human Torch utilizes his fire powers, such as creating an AoE burst of flames around him, or launching a fireball ahead. He can also do a flying dive where he launches fireballs towards the ground. His ultimate ability launches a bunch of fireballs across the environment and is a great way to clear the room. So Torch has a lot of good range and he's quick, making him a very strong character in the game. Invisible Woman is also more of a ranged character, using her force fields to shoot projectiles at enemies or knock them back. Even just her basic heavy attack can rapid fire some short range projectiles, which was great for keeping some distance and maintaining pressure. Her abilities are pretty solid too. For example, she has 2 different types of force bubbles that she can fire. One is a quick burst of 3 bubbles that will damage enemies and knock them back, or you can fire homing bubbles that track enemies, ensuring that someone will take some damage if not multiple enemies, but with the downside that the bubbles are slower and don't knock enemies back. She also has an ability called Oscillating Floor, where she'll lift pillars from the ground which knock enemies backward as well. She also has some unique animations, such as when she jumps, she levitates herself using a force disc like she does in the comics. She'll even weaponize it if you press the attack button while midair, extending the platform into a cone to deal damage. I also like her dash animation where she slides on a force field, and her hair looks pretty funny in the wind too. Unfortunately for Sue, she looks a bit goofy in her block animation, the way she's posed with her back arched and one leg kicked forward. I imagine it's meant to look strenuous, so I at least appreciate the attempt. Also, she punches like a Rock'em Sock'em robot, which is a little funny as well. On the more positive side, her ultimate ability is my favorite move in the game, and it's her invisibility. When triggered, she can run around without being targeted by enemies, allowing her to safely hit them for the entire duration. Not only was this great for damage output, but also because it can give you a nice breather if you're crowded with enemies or want some better positioning. So going invisible was a lot of fun and tense moments. Overall, Invisible Woman is quite versatile, and I'd say that her, Torch, and Mr. Fantastic are probably the best characters to play as. Speaking of which, let's look at Mr. Fantastic. Both his inventiveness and elasticity come into play in his abilities. On the inventive side, he can throw stun grenades, or he can fire a cosmic ray gun. On the stretchy side, he can shapeshift his arms into maces to hit nearby enemies. I also like that when you do heavy and light attacks, his hands will shift into boxing gloves and hammers. He's also got a great jump attack where he'll turn into a ball and bounce onto enemies. For his ultimate ability, he'll turn into a giant block and slam the area. I didn't notice until editing, but he even turns the lower half of his body into a spring first to propel himself upwards. So not only is Mr. Fantastic quite strong in this game, but he's also got the best animations. As a further example, even when you take damage he'll still be stretching around, and I especially enjoyed his movements after being gassed by this orangutan looking enemy, since he does a funny little noodly dance. When Reed blocks, he enlarges his chest to tank the incoming damage, which is easily the most unique block animation. Even his dash forward is kind of funny, since he'll just stretch and do a long step. So it's clear the animation team was having the most fun designing Reed. But now let's look at the Thing, and as usual, he gets the short end of the stick. As you'd expect, he's got a lot of strength, but the cost is that he moves slower, so I found that he was easiest for the enemies to interrupt, or just outright stun lock. Still, his abilities are pretty cool, like a shoulder charge attack where he'll run through enemies and knock them over, or a move where he'll grab a chunk of the ground and hurl it at them. His ultimate ability is a ground slam that knocks out nearby enemies, but even that move felt weak. I actually found his Thunderclap move to be more reliable. It's an AoE attack that does good damage, especially in level 1. The best part about it is the animation is quick, and you can use it an unlimited amount of times. So if you just want to spam this ability, you can do some good chip damage to help clear rooms faster. It's a bit of a cheese and not very fun, but at least it's effective. By the way, the developers must have been aware of how easy it would be to cheese the game, because they even included a little cheese icon that appears next to your character icon if it detects that you're using the same attack repeatedly. There's no punishment for it, it's just there to insult you, which is pretty funny. I imagine it would have been even funnier when playing with friends, since it would snitch you out, allowing your friends to harass you further. But we still have one other character, and that's She-Hulk. I was actually really excited to see her as a playable character here, since even today, it's still one of the very few games where she's playable, especially outside of mobile games. Already, you can see that she certainly stands out amongst the crowd at nearly double the size of the other character models. She's pretty fun too, although not crazy powerful. To start, she has a couple of melee abilities, the first of which is an uppercut, which honestly was pretty terrible since it's slow and has like no range. Her kick ability is better since it has more range, but it's also slow to perform. Then we have her ground stomp AoE ability, and it was decently effective in a crowd. Last is her ultimate ability, where she performs a giant leap and comes crashing down to the ground. She-Hulk's abilities overall aren't too strong, but she's at least well-rounded. I actually think she's best just using her basic punches and kicks, since those attacks are very quick, plus her longer limbs can reach enemies with ease. So each character has some good abilities and decent fun factor unique to them. The frustration mostly lies with how clunky it can be to initiate abilities, and how stiff the overall combat feels. Still, at the very least, I can appreciate the attempt to make the character's powers feel accurate to the comics. The comic accuracy applies to other aspects of the game too, and although I'll have a lot of criticisms throughout this video, my main compliment is that it does feel like Probe Entertainment did their best to draw from the comics. For example, our first mini-boss of the game is this creature who's emerged from the ground, and it's the same one from the cover of Fantastic Four #1, which itself featured Mole Man as the main villain, so I found it fitting that Mole Man would also be the game's first antagonist. As far as gameplay though, beating this creature feels sort of clumsy again. You can't punch it, and other moloids are in the area to fight you as well, so it's not clear if the giant monster is more of an environmental hazard, or if you're legitimately supposed to beat him somehow. The answer is the latter, and you'll do it via rocks that drop onto the ground. A mechanic I didn't really mention earlier is the throw ability, allowing you to toss enemies towards the camera or away. The game tries to incorporate this in additional ways, like having rooms with tokens in them that you can only grab if you throw an enemy through the door. You can also throw objects too, usually through another clumsy directional input, but in the case of this fight, you just need to run up to a rock and press the left trigger, and you'll throw the rock at the monster, damaging it. One detail I like is that a few characters throw the rock in a unique way, like Invisible Woman, who uses a force blast to launch it, or Human Torch, who actually punts it, which has to be painful. The cheesiest one is Mr. Fantastic, who in old white man fashion, does it while practicing his golf swing. After you beat the monster though, the game will jump to a load screen. The game's load screen is actually surprisingly fun and interactive though, since instead of just watching a load bar, you'll be able to play a little racing game while you wait. It's nothing too intricate, but it keeps you active and helps pass the time. I imagine this would be even better when playing with friends, and honestly, I could see you getting more lost in this load screen than in the actual game. Regardless, I thought it was a fun inclusion. Before the game lets us continue with the story, it also throws us into another separate minigame, and that's a one-on-one fight against one of 3 super characters. In this case, I went against Dragon Man, who's pretty much as his name implies. Without getting too deep into his history, he's an artificial creation that was given life by the villain Diablo. He's tough too, since he can easily stunlock you and it only takes him 4 hits to kill you, so I struggled the most against him. The other characters you fight are more manageable, as well as recognizable. The first is Iceman from the X-Men, although I'd forgive you for not knowing immediately because he looks more like the Silver Surfer. But anyway, Iceman plays like a mirror of the Human Torch. He'll shoot ice projectiles, and his ultimate ability is the same as Torch's, just with ice raining down. Then there's the Incredible Hulk, who's actually smaller than I expected. As far as his combat, he mostly uses a stomp ability similar to She-Hulk's to try and lock you down. Still, surprisingly, I found him to be the easiest to beat. Regardless, whether you win or lose here doesn't seem to matter, so I guess it's just an extra bonus level. I'm not sure, it honestly seemed pretty random to me. But continuing with the story, we'll next fight our way through some more environments before making our way into Mole Man's lair. Here, we confront the Mole Man himself, riding on a red blimp, or at least I assume that's what you'd call it. This is from the comics though, since Mole Man would occasionally fly around on this red vehicle there too. As we enter the room, he even has some voice lines. It's It's not a voice I expected, but I think it fits the strangeness of the character, so I actually like it. This fight visually looks pretty cool too, but sadly, it's another one that's not very intuitive. Are you supposed to punch the blimp? Do you need to do ranged attacks? Can you only deal damage with ultimates? It's not clear. From what I can tell, the only way to damage it is to throw enemies at it. I guess because allowing regular attacks and abilities to damage it would be too easy. Regardless, once you damage the blimp enough, it'll explode, leaving Mole Man no choice but to fight you directly. After you beat him up for a while, he'll throw a tantrum on the ground, and we can hear his final voice line. This is probably the one chapter that ends pretty definitively, although we didn't collect anything, so I'm not sure what Doom's plan for us is exactly. Nevertheless, this begins Chapter 2, Subatomic Nightmare. It reads, "No sooner have the heroes defeated Mole Man when they are transported to the atomic world of Subatomica. What is going on?" In the comics, Subatomica is a system of worlds within the Microverse, which itself you can only visit if you shrink yourself down to a microscopic size. Subatomica is the home system of the villain PyschoMan, the main villain of this chapter. In the comics, PyschoMan wields a control panel called the Psycho Ray, which can induce feelings of fear, doubt, or hate in its target. So for example, he used the fear button against the Thing in the comics, which made him hallucinate this green creature that he couldn't overpower. PyschoMan stated that the creature was a manifestation of Thing's fear of his own great power getting out of control. I believe we even see this green creature in the game as we fight our way through Subatomica. We'll soon encounter another mini-boss too, and it's this weird guy with the multiple arms. He's from the comics too, and was another hallucination that the PyschoMan conjured, this time against the Fantastic Four and the Inhumans. Like in previous fights, we can't hit him directly, we instead have to backhand enemies at him. This one is really frustrating though, because to do that, you have to stand in front of him, so he's probably going to hit you a lot in the process. So this was a really annoying fight, but it's at least cool to see Probe pull another comic creature. Even better though is that shortly after this room, we encounter PyschoMan himself. I was excited to see that, like in the comics, he's wielding his Psycho Ray device as he runs around the room. Like Mole Man, he also speaks to us at the beginning of the level, and I really love how cartoonish he sounds. It's quite fitting.
You think you can beat me here in my own domain?
His fight is decent too, although the first time I fought him, I accidentally stun-locked him and beat him in just a few seconds, so he can be surprisingly easy to defeat. When I played it again later, I found that it's actually a pretty fun boss fight if you let it play out, and he'll even use his Psycho Ray to trigger feelings of fear, doubt, or hate during it. Each one has a different effect on the fight too. For example, the fear button enlarges the lizard-looking creature to make it scarier. If he hits the doubt button, your character will shrink, as if your character psychology doubts itself to the point of feeling small. When he hits the hate button, your character will start attacking randomly on its own, against your inputs. This was probably the trickiest one to deal with, since it became tough to adapt to your player character going rogue and attacking on its own. Even if I didn't press any buttons, my character would still spaz out and do all sorts of random movements. PyschoMan can have multiple of these psychological effects going on at once, so I think the point of his boss fight is to have a bit of a snowball effect, where he gets tougher the longer you let him go on. Still, his health is pretty minimal, so it's not too tough to overpower him, despite his changes to the gameplay. And once we defeat him, we'll move on to Chapter 3. This one is titled The Days of Skrull World, and it reads, "The Fantastic Four's strange journey continues as they are beamed to Skrull World, just as the omnipresent Galactus is devouring it." Okay, so that actually sounds really awesome. For some comic context, if you're unfamiliar with Galactus, he's a powerful cosmic being who survives by draining planets to sustain himself, which destroys the planet in the process. Then you have the Skrulls, who are shape-shifting aliens. In the comics, Galactus did in fact devour the Skrulls' throne world, so it seems that we're in the middle of this same encounter. As we begin the level, it sets a good first impression. I'm digging all the alien architecture of the Skrulls' world, and the Skrulls themselves look great, just like they were pulled from the comics. While playing this level, I was so focused on the enemies that I didn't really pay attention to my surroundings, so looking at it now, I think it's cool to see ships flying away in the background and certain bits of architecture collapsing and getting destroyed due to Galactus' ongoing invasion, so I thought those were great details. Also, I have to compliment the music here too. I know I've been ragging on it so far, but in this level, it actually has a great background theme. It's very sci-fi and video gamey, which I'm enjoying. I'm sure you knew it was coming though. What do I not like about this chapter? Well, mostly the way they fumble such a cool level. For starters, about midway into things, you ride an elevator up to the top of a tower for what felt like just another fight. I didn't realize until later that this was actually another mini-boss, since we're fighting the Super Skrull the whole time. For context, the Super Skrull has the same abilities as the Fantastic Four, but all within himself, so he's quite an imposing enemy. Here though, he's so inconsequential amongst the other minions that I didn't even realize I was fighting him. To give you a better look, I went back later to see his powers closer, and here you can see him using stretching powers in combination with Thing's exterior to make a rocky hammer punch. That's cool, but I never noticed during the actual fight, so ultimately, I was really disappointed he didn't make more of an impression. But after fighting him, you continue fighting through more Skrulls as usual. Eventually, you'll reach this split pathway, and as you follow it, it'll trigger a load screen, and then the title card for the next chapter appears. What? What just happened? Did my game skip? Where did I walk off to? I guess I just got teleported away? There was nothing to signify that it was the end of the mission. No final boss, no item collection, I just walked a bit more. Even worse is we never see Galactus, so this chapter was very short and very disappointing. There must have been a cut section from here because the design just doesn't make sense, which is such a bummer because this level looks so cool at the beginning. But anyway, we're on to chapter 4 now, Atlantean Attack, emphasis on the question mark. But it reads, next stop, New York Harbor, where an aquatic attack appears to be the work of Namor, Prince of the Seas. Can the Fantastic Four get to the bottom of this marine mystery? As the text stated, our mission begins at the harbor where we fight off a variety of aquatic creatures and Atlantean soldiers. We'll then hop on a boat where we'll fight more soldiers, or just let them fall single file into a hole. The boat then brings us to an island where we'll find Namor, the ruler of Atlantis. Assuming he's the aggressor here, we fight him next. It's a normal enough fight, but it's made frustrating due to the rocks on the edge of the island, which constantly block the camera, making it really tough to see what's going on. Even worse though is that this level constantly bugs out after you beat Namor. What happens is he'll stop fighting and tell you that he's not the one behind the attack and that he needs our assistance to stop the real perpetrator. That's all well and good, except that we can't progress the game because his voiceover bugs and loops forever.
Listen to me. I'm not behind this aquatic attack. Atlantis is also in grave danger. You've got to come and help. Listen to me. I'm not behind this aquatic attack. Atlantis is also in grave danger. You've got to come and help. Listen to me. I'm not behind this aquatic attack.
You get the point. I thought maybe it was a one-time thing or just on the emulator I was using, but it happened when I played on console too. Thankfully, the game has a cheat menu, and one of the options is a level skip where you can hop to different checkpoints. Even that can't be easy though, because when you go to select chapter 4, it's grayed out. Why? I have no idea, so at first I thought I was just locked out of that mission, but it turns out you have to instead input chapter 6, which doesn't exist by the way, since there are only 5 chapters in the game. So for some reason, the Atlantis chapter is only accessible as chapter 6. My only guess is that there was some kind of bug with the level select here, and making it chapter 6 instead was the band-aid fix, but I'm just speculating. It's really weird regardless. But skipping to the next checkpoint takes us to the real villain, Attuma. This is comic accurate as well, since Attuma has attempted to overthrow Namor to become ruler of Atlantis there too. The first time he did this in the comics, the Fantastic Four helped Namor fight Attuma, although Namor never knew it. It was actually Lady Dorma of Atlantis who requested their aid, but mostly out of guilt. At the beginning of the battle, she asked Namor not to put himself in harm's way because she loved him. He immediately shot her down, so in retaliation, she ordered some of their guards away from a vital post so that Attuma's army could easily break through. Later, she felt bad and asked the Fantastic Four to help. Still, they didn't really have much motivation to help Namor, due to reasons such as him attacking them on occasion, having a rather arrogant personality in general, but most of all, him regularly trying to steal the Invisible Woman away to be his bride and queen. Although she wasn't totally opposed to the idea, as you can see by the way she's standing with him here. In fact, for a time in the early comics, she was conflicted with her feelings between Reed and Namor, something Reed was very aware of. Despite all that, Reed still decided to help Namor in his battle with Attuma by using an oxo spray he invented, which allowed the team to breathe underwater, and even let Johnny use his flame abilities there too. So my assumption is that's how the team are fighting Attuma underwater during this boss fight. Speaking of which, I was really hoping Namor would be here to assist us too. That could have made this fight more unique, and it feels out of character since Namor's ego wouldn't allow him to ask for help in a fight and then let others fight that battle for him. Still, there are aspects of this level that I like. I think the environment looks really good, and thankfully we don't have to throw enemies at the giant creature in the background. It will, however, attempt to damage us by spitting out bubbles, but luckily, they hurt Attuma and his men too. In fact, I felt like I didn't really have to deal with Attuma much myself, since he and his men would accidentally hit each other with their ranged attacks often. Still, this mission was a bit frustrating, mainly due to the guards' frequent use of ranged attacks and the constant bubbles, which knock you down and lead to a really slow get-up animation. But since these same things hurt Attuma as well, it at least made things more manageable. But once we defeat Attuma, the chapter ends and we're thrust into Chapter 5 titled, Is the World Doomed? It reads, using electrical components collected through his travels, Mr. Fantastic has created a time machine which takes the heroes to the root of their problems, Doomstadt, where they must stop Dr. Doom and foil his plans. When I first played this, I had no idea we were meant to have been time traveling the whole game. Only the scroll level seemed like a noteworthy moment in history, everything else just seemed like normal teleporting. The synopsis in the booklet does mention us traveling through history, so I guess that's what's meant to have been happening the whole game, but it's definitely not clear in the actual gameplay. So let's just continue forward. So if you're unfamiliar with Dr. Doom, he's indeed the ruler of the fictional country Latveria, and lives in a castle in the capital city, Doomstadt. So in the Marvel universe, it's a country that you could travel to like any other. Likewise, we see the Fantastic Four fly in on what I assume is their Fantasticar, which they also use in the comics. We're also confronted by Doom's robot army. Usually I'd call them Doombots, but I think those are most commonly associated with robots that closely resemble Doom. These robots, on the other hand, are his servo guards, who he uses to protect Latveria, so it's pretty cool to see them used here. I love the environment here too, as Doomstadt has the medieval European architecture like it does in the comics. The music actually fits the medieval theme too, which I thought was fun. We'll next fight our way into the castle as we continue towards Doom. Along the way, I thought it was funny that Doom has a banner of himself hanging on the wall in the background, and there's also this strange Doom statue in the center of the village that I thought was weirdly cool. But after fighting through more of the castle, we'll soon come face to face with Doom. This is also where we get the most voice lines in the game, as each member of the Fantastic Four has something to say to him except for She-Hulk. Interestingly, the more original Fantastic Four members you bring to this fight, the more Doom will speak. His voice acting isn't great, but I do at least enjoy Stallone Thing. Go ahead and take a listen for yourself.
The Fantastic Four. I'm glad you could finally drop in on me.
What do you want with us, madman?
Ah, my dear Sue, always the inquisitive mind. You see, by constructing your time machine to escape my trap, you've inadvertently brought me the rare equipment I need to help me take over the universe.
Doom, let us go, you maniac!
Come on now, Richards, you know that's not in my character.
That's it! I've had enough of this guy.
So I guess his plan all along was to trick us into building a time machine for him, but how did he send us through time in the first place then? I guess he needed us to use specific components in ours? I don't know. He has done something similar in the comics though, during an early issue where he sends the team back in time to steal Blackbeard's treasure for him, so it's at least not out of character for him to send people through time to do his dirty work. Even more frustrating than the plot though is that Doom's voiceover bugs and loops here the same way Namor's did earlier. So again, I was railroaded, but this time it was worse because it's the last fight of the game, so he can't just level skip to the next checkpoint. I don't know what causes the bug, but after a few desperate attempts on the PS1, I got lucky and managed to actually fight him while playing only as She-Hulk. Doom's fight was pretty tricky too. He blocks all of your attacks with a force field whenever you strike him, making it tough to damage him. What you have to do is try to interrupt him while he's initiating an attack. This was tough since performing your own attacks can be slow, so you're eating a lot of damage while trying to catch him off guard. It's much harder solo too, since you can't just let your team distract him, you instead have to try and guess when he's about to attack since the window of opportunity is so small. As you can see, it's really annoying. I also found his attacks kind of strange, like pulling out a pistol that shoots a rocket, or upping the ante by pulling out an even bigger rocket launcher. In the comics, he has a little pistol and will also perform gauntlet blasts, so I'm not sure why they didn't just use those. The only compliment I can give it is that it's cool being inside Doom's castle, and it's fun seeing his throne off in the corner, with a stained glass image of himself looming over Latveria. Other than that, this fight is pretty lame, but once you deal enough damage to him, that'll complete the game, and we're given a poorly voiced closing cinematic.
Great work, team.
It seems the world can sleep easy once again.
Yeah, till the next wacko tries to blow it up.
Yeah, but that's why we're here. The greatest superhero team in the world, the Fantastic Four!
And that concludes the story of the Fantastic Four. I guess to sum up my thoughts, we'll start with the story. As we've discussed, it feels so thrown together. Going through it again while creating this video, I'm able to kind of parse some things out using the manual and load screens and analyze levels more closely, to a point that we can kind of cobble some things together, but when you're in the middle of the game and just jumping in for the first time, it makes no sense. It's really missing cinematics in between levels or some kind of dialogue between characters because the current transitions are so abrupt that they're whiplash inducing. I felt like I had amnesia. Suddenly I'm somewhere new and I have no idea how I got there. Then there's the gameplay, which is also pretty rough, to put it mildly. It's just too clunky and slow. Still, if I were to compliment anything, I at least liked the uniqueness of each playable character, and it was fun enough using their powers. It got old really fast though, since you're just doing the same thing repeatedly with little challenge variation. The game felt very repetitive, which is a problem because it's only about 2 hours long. I'd say the gameplay got stale much earlier than that too, at around the 30-minute mark, so if it can't stay enjoyable for even that brief duration, that's quite problematic. The sound design was pretty hit or miss, and the musical score was all over the place. There were some levels like the scroll one where the music was fun and added to the level, and then there were ones like the Mole Man missions which were distractingly out of alignment. The voice acting was similar, with some characters being kind of fun and zany like Psycho Man and Mole Man, while others were really rough like Dr. Doom and the Human Torch, especially in that final cinematic. The sound effects weren't too bad though. Punches had a satisfying thwap to them which felt impactful, and picking up collectibles felt audibly nice as well. To give you a better idea of the overall sound design, here's a short gameplay clip.
It's clobbering time!
Overall, despite my criticisms of the sound design, I think it ultimately succeeds in providing a fun vibe for you to fight enemies to. Even when the music is going rogue and doing some jazz saxophone, it's still pretty fun. I think that ties in with how I feel overall about this game. Is it good? Absolutely not. Is it a funny game to jump in and play with some friends for an hour or two? Yeah, I think it is. It'll provide some laughs, and you won't feel bad about putting the controller down when you're done, even if you haven't finished the game. Plus, I like that it provides some extra modes to play around with if you want some additional variety, such as a competitive mode where you can damage your own allies, making fights much more chaotic, but also probably funnier too if you're playing with friends. You can also adjust the size of your characters, either shrinking them down or enlarging them, which definitely adds to the craziness. So this game may not be good in the standard sense, but it has some fun to offer. But if you've watched my channel before, you've likely noticed I'm a bit of an easy grader. I like to give games the benefit of the doubt, even when they're really rough around the edges. So what were other reviews like back at the time of release? Well, from what I could find, reviewers weren't kind. Reviews ranged typically from a mixed standpoint to pretty scathing. Here's an example of the latter from IGN. It reads, "Every once in a while, a game comes along that redefines exactly what bad is. It establishes a new low point for the industry as a whole, a marker that other companies can look at and say, well, now we know what not to do. Fantastic Four is such a game. Based on the Marvel Comics publication of the same name, Fantastic Four is unique in the sense that it could very well be the worst game ever made." Damn. Needless to say, they rated it a 1. This next review quote comes from Game Informer magazine. "Wrap the whole package up with an enormously grating smooth jazz soundtrack and you have a superhero game that even the Power Pack wouldn't put its name on. If you're not familiar with that subpar superhero team, we recommend you dig up some of their comics in a 25-cent bin rather than play this piece of pulpy trash." When we look at Electronic Games Magazine's 1998 Buyer's Guide, we can see that they awarded Fantastic Four as the worst use of a good license for the year. Their description reads, "Sure, the Fantastic Four might not be the hippest crew of crime fighters in Marvel Comics' stable of superhumans, but surely they deserved a better game than this ho-hum PlayStation side-scroller from Acclaim. Aside from its somewhat decent polygonal graphics, Fantastic Four is nothing more than a dull, repetitive Final Fight rehash. Yeah, you get a few special moves and the occasional brawl with special guest star superheroes, but that's only if you can manage to stay focused on the uninteresting gameplay. Heck, the racing game you can play during load time is almost as much fun." Interestingly, only a few pages later they also awarded Best 180-Degree Turnaround to Acclaim. In their description, they mention Acclaim's terrible track record and how they're trying to turn things around. EGM states that they seem to be on track to do so after releasing the well-received game Turok, while a few games lined up for the future also seem promising. In particular, they mention Forsaken as one of those games, but funnily enough, also Batman and Robin, the tie-in game for the George Clooney Batman film. EGM also describes why Batman looks promising, while also doubling back a bit with regards to Fantastic Four. This time though, Batman and the Boy Wonder are in complete 3D. Overall, Acclaim's upcoming games look simply incredible. On the other hand, they are bringing out Fantastic Four. Well, maybe it's only a 158-degree turn. So what was the deal with Acclaim back then, you might ask? Well, they had a reputation for pushing out games with attractive licenses but poor overall quality. I found an interview between the CEO of Acclaim, Greg Fischbach, and Next Generation magazine surprisingly candid and very insightful, so let's take a look at some of their interaction. To start, Next Generation does a good job of summing up Acclaim's reputation in this opening paragraph. Back in the days of Super NES and Genesis, you couldn't swing a joypad without hitting mountains of carts based on big movie tie-ins and superhero cash-ins. Rambo, Hulk Hogan, Batman, Arnold Schwarzenegger, The Simpsons, Bruce Lee, the list could go on. Typically, these types of games all sucked. Typically, they got slammed by the press. Typically, the gameplay consisted of walking in a straight line, then punching, kicking, and special moving brainless enemies. Typically, the name on the box was Acclaim. When Greg was asked why Acclaim pushed out low-quality games like this, he states that stores were only interested in licenses. I remember having a conversation with a buyer for a large chain of retail stores, and we would bring him titles like Wizards and Warriors, and he would say, "No, I don't want it. You bring me a name I recognize and I'll buy your title." So we brought him Rambo and he put it in his release schedule. Now, Rambo was not as good a game as Wizards and Warriors, but that was the way he worked and we had to deal with that. Next Generation later asked Greg what changed in the market, to which he describes gaming magazines and the internet beginning to dictate popularity. Before 1995, there were a lot of video game magazines that talked about games, but they had very little influence on which games sold well and which did not. In 1995 and in 1996, however, the specialist magazines and the internet became much more influential in dictating taste, establishing products, and making products successful. Gamers became a whole lot better informed. Next Generation responds with, "You're saying it got more difficult to sneak a bad game onto the market," to which Greg replies, "It got almost impossible, but they do still occasionally get there." Facing severe financial struggles, Acclaim needed to pivot and make a new name for themselves, which is what they were doing around the time Fantastic Four released. However, Fantastic Four was clearly a bad look and seemingly contrasted with the good name they were going for, so why release it? Well, Next Generation asked Greg this, to which he replied, "Sometimes, like in the case of Fantastic Four, we have to continue with a project whether we like to or not, because we have a contractual obligation to do so. So there are some things that we do from time to time that don't appear to make any sense to anybody." So I take that to mean that the Fantastic Four was a game that they knew either needed to be delayed or cancelled outright, but they decided to release it anyway due to contractual obligations while hoping it would still sell well. I think that explains a lot of the issues I'm experiencing with Fantastic Four, and overall why it feels so incomplete. It was just sent out so they could wipe their hands clean of it. So that's really disappointing, and the Fantastic Four deserved a better game, so I agree with EGM stating that it was a wasted use of a good license. Still, I stand by my compliments that Probe Entertainment did a decent enough job staying true to the source material while attempting to bring the Fantastic Four comics to life, something that wouldn't really be attempted again until the Fantastic Four movie game in 2005, another game I plan to check out in the future on this channel. But what happened to Acclaim? Well, they fought to keep the company alive for as long as they could, but ultimately they just couldn't recover and filed for bankruptcy in 2004. As a result, Probe Entertainment was shut down as well. Whether you like the quality of their output or not, it's sad to see companies shut down. I didn't know much about Acclaim coming into this video, so I was hoping to read that they overcame their past, redeemed their name, and are still active today. Sadly, that's not the case. Well, at least for that era of Acclaim, since coincidentally, while I was finishing up this video, news came out that Acclaim Entertainment is being relaunched under new leadership. CEO Alex Joseph stated that, first and foremost, the new Acclaim is going to support indie developers and new original IP. It will provide all of the resources needed to bring their games to the widest possible audiences. Given the stigma around their old reputation, it's quite surprising to see Acclaim return, but I'm hopeful things will turn out better this time. This announcement is still quite new, so we'll have to wait and see how things play out as they release new games. Still, I'm left very curious about their prior games, especially the Batman and Robin movie game, and whether or not it ended up being a better experience than the film. So while I'm experimenting with shorter videos like this one, we'll check that game out next. By the way, both this video and Batman and Robin will be the first of a new series I'm starting under the umbrella of Casual Retros, which as the name implies, will be shorter, more casual retrospectives on games I may not have been able to cover otherwise. My hope is that it will allow me to release more content in general, and give attention to a larger amount of games. So if you enjoyed this and would like to see similar content, please give the video a like and let me know, as I'll be monitoring how people feel about it for a while before fully committing to an ongoing series. As far as what's next on my channel, my next larger scale video will be an in-depth look at Spider-Man Web of Shadows. So if you haven't already, you can subscribe to stay up to date on all new releases. You can also join me on Patreon, where I'll release exclusive videos and provide early access to all new retrospectives. But I think that'll do it for this video, so thank you everyone for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.